Like I said, my name is Joe Wendelberger with J. Anthony Homes, J. Anthony Construction. What we're going to cover today is construction management, and the functions within that are going to be estimating, the pre-dig process, estimating, and then production. Many of you have your own systems. Maybe you could take away some of the things I'm going to share with you today. But really the important thing is that, if you've got a question, if you've got questions on what I have here, put your hand up, just stop, and we'll address whatever the question is. I want to try to keep you guys awake and keep things as interesting as possible. I'm not a big PowerPoint guy, so I've got a lot of props here too. So if you can't see the prop, we can talk about it after we're done here. What we're going to cover today, the production process. We've got the pre-dig process, the role of the construction manager, and safety. I'm huge on safety, especially in our business. I think it doesn't get paid enough attention. And construction makes up a majority of all workplace fatalities in this country. So safety is a huge, huge issue in our business. We're going to talk about estimating, construction documents, construction plans, and cost management. The other thing that I want you to take away from this, and you'll probably hear me say it a ton, is the power of a signature. And when that customer gives you a signature, or a trade contractor gives you a signature, that's really it. I can't tell you how many times in arbitration cases where if they would have just had that signature, we wouldn't have a room full of people sitting there trying to figure out who said what and who did what or who didn't do what. So really the power of a signature is just huge. So we're going to talk about that, and we'll kind of roll that into the whole presentation. Construction planning and cost management, and then third we're going to talk about production and estimating. It's going to be a fluid presentation. We'll start out with the pre-dig, but then as we get into estimating, you'll see we'll flip back and forth to production and estimating. So the contract is signed. Now what do you do? Hopefully most of your businesses have a formal process. If they don't, let's get you there. But a formal process is really something that's essential if you want to give that customer the building experience that they deserve and they've paid for. And not only that, I always tell people I have a system in place so I don't go crazy. That way you know what you can do, you know what to expect, as that job's moving along, different milestones, different things that as soon as you hit that, you've got your policies and procedures in place, and you'll know what the next step is. So you sign the contract, and now we've got that customer in pre-dig. Hopefully, before you've signed the contract, you've done a lot visit. If not, that would be the time to do a lot visit with the customer. You can do it with the customer. You can do it with your superintendent or you, or whoever's going to take the time to do the lot visit. Again, the information age that we live in, everything being electronic, I always, take some digital pictures of that. So if you do have some design questions as the customer's going through selections, you can reference to those pictures. We have a site condition report that either our salesperson or our expediter will go out to the job site and fill out. Some of the things that you want to be mindful of is trees on the lot. Are there culverts? Where are the utilities? Is it a rural lot? Is there gas service? So a lot of those things, if you've got to run electricity across the highway, are there going to be fees associated with that? You can give that heads up to the customer. So you really want to understand that lot thoroughly so that the customer isn't surprised with additional charges once the house starts to take shape on the lot. You want to place the house on the lot. If the customer wants to meet the surveyor out at the lot, certainly that's doable. We always charge a little extra for that because typically they're going to take more time for the surveyor. and they always get out there and have the conversation about how the house is going to face, and they're moving this and moving that, but that's our policy. You want to do a preliminary survey and get that to the customer. So we always have the house placed on the lot. If the customer wants to meet out there, that's fine. We could take the survey out there, but you place it on the lot, and then we have the customer sign off on the survey saying they've given us the permission to proceed with the stakeout. Not that we go ahead and stake it out and they say, hey, I didn't tell you. Again, with that signature, they have given us the authority and the okay to go ahead and stake that out. The customer signs off on that, the house gets staked out, and then we go into selections. Again, it's really important that you have some process in place that you follow. We happen to have a showroom that all of our customers come into. They do all their selections right there with the exception of lighting. Lighting, they'll go to the lighting store. If you don't have one place that they come to make all of their selections, have a process on how they're going to go about making their selections. One of the things that I hear often from people that are building is they were chased around town. You know, they didn't know, they got to the countertop place, they didn't know what was included. So, you know, it tells me that builders not communicating with their vendors, not communicating with their suppliers. So when you've got customers going out to meet your vendors, make sure the vendors not only know that the customer's coming, but they also know what you've included as standard in their contract. And then also, you want to be able to communicate with them if the customer upgrades, how are they going to handle that? Are they going to handle it right there? Are they going to, is the customer going to pay the difference directly to your supplier or contractor? So you just want to make sure that those things are communicated clearly. And again, you want to have the control. And then establish the flow of communication between the builder, the vendor, and the customer. Change orders and purchase orders, you know, those are things as you're going through the selections process. You want to, you know, whether or not you open a change order up and you don't charge the customer for the change order as they're going through selections, or you charge them for each change order, that's going to be dictated up by you as the builder and what your policy is. The contract plans should match the proposal, contract, foundation plan, and where the house is surveyed. What we do is we actually have a set of plans that we stamp that say contract plans, and those are the plans that we then build from there as far as design goes. So we've got a starting point, the contract, proposal, and the plans match everything. The customer signs off on all of that. Any changes that you make after the contract is signed, you should do with a written change order. Customer signs off. Staking begins after the final sign-off. The Architectural Control Committee, if applicable. A lot of times we're finding that these developers are asking for a lot more than what builders will include in their standards. So sometimes it's stone, sometimes it's shutters. And what you want to do is you really want to, we kind of get in front of it before we sign a contract. We'll do a preliminary architectural approval if they will do it. We'll send the plan over to them, ask them, does this meet the requirements? If it doesn't, what are the additional things that you want us to add? That way we can get it into the contract. However, if the customer signs a contract with you, it goes in and you've got to make the changes after the contract is signed, make sure you do it with a written change order. You want to create a production list. You've got final plans, the customer signs off, they're stamped final, and only the final plans get out to the field. As you're going through that pre-dig process, what we typically do, and we note everything, is, you know, we've got our contract plans that are stamped contract plan, but every time we meet the customer and a plan change is made, we date it, the customer signs it, and we also have diligent notes that we've taken through the conversations that we've had with that customer. Many of the things that we see in arbitration, stem from people that got plans crossed, okay? And so you really want to make sure that you're keeping track of your plans as you're going through that pre-dig process, especially the more customized you get. And it seems even the most basic homes nowadays, people are wanting to customize those things. So once that is all complete, what we will do then is we will stamp final plans, and we will send those plans out to the field after the customer has signed off on them. So everything with a signature along the entire way is what I would really like you to take away from here today. I have had experiences in the past where I have gotten preliminary plans. This is in my former life as a carpenter contractor. The builder has given me a set of plans. We go out there and we build the house, and it's not the final plans. It was 3 prelims ago, the staircase is moved, and we've got the house half decked up. So you can understand why you need to have policies and procedures in place. You need to control the process. The customer should not control the process. And I'm sure no one out there has ever had a customer they can't control, right? Yeah. And the vendors, they shouldn't control the process either. You're the builder, you're the general contractor, you're the individual that should have the policies and procedures in place. Even if you're a one-man shop and you do everything up here in your head, you really need to understand that you control that process. And with a process, you really can control those out-of-control customers. Our policy is we typically won't dig a home until all the selections are made and they've signed off on everything. And I'll invariably get the question a couple times a year, why do you need to know what kind of tile and carpet I'm putting in my house before you excavate? And it's just our process. There are some customers that we will be a little flexible with, but faucets and anything that could be back ordered, anything that you're potentially could have a discontinued item that they've selected, whether it's a tile, you want a heads up on that. Okay, so whatever your process is, stick to it and use that process as a tool to control the customer. Any questions on the pre-dig process? Typically what we do at the end of the pre-dig process, that's what the front of our plans look like. So we have everything from the top of foundation elevation down to the cabinet pulls that they're going to put on their master bathroom vanity. Okay? So once the customer goes through this item by item, they'll go through it line by line, and they understand everything. They'll sign all 4 sheets of paper here, and they'll sign their name. Now we're ready to roll. Okay? So what we've really done is we've set the expectations for the customer, and we understand what those expectations are, and now we can launch off into hopefully a productive and profitable building process. Once we've gotten through pre-dig, final plans are signed off by the customer, and I do make them sign every page of the plans, okay? Because I want them to take ownership that they've looked at all those plans, every single page, okay? And that's what I tell them. We're going to own what we own. We want to make sure you know what you own, and we want to make sure you know what you're buying. So they sign every page. So we usually start our production process with a pre-dig meeting. In that meeting, the customer, superintendent, they set the expectations, talk about limitations, talk about things that they can expect throughout the process. What are the customer's expectations? If they have the expectation that you're going to break ground and a basement's going to be in 2 days, and carpenters will be there 2 days after, and my house will be done in a month, that's not reasonable. So what are your expectations? When do you expect to be in your home? Future plans. If you're not a turnkey builder, you're not putting driveways, walks, landscaping, and things like that in, you want to really understand that. If your customer is going to be putting a pool in their backyard, you don't want to run the gas and electric right through their backyard, put their pedestal, right where their patio is going to be. So get those things understood. Where the utilities enter the building, which side you want the air conditioning compressor on. Is it going to be under the master bedroom window, or can we put it on the other side of the house? We want to identify the buy owner items. That's a huge one. And when we talk about expectations, remember they're buying your product. They're buying your process. And even if it's a buy owner item, you should set limitations and set expectations in terms of what you're expecting from them. One of the things that we do, and a lot of this stuff is based on my experience through arbitration, where I see a builder get smoked because he didn't really document things as well as he should have. And what we do is any buy owner items, we actually have them sign off and take responsibility of it. Okay, so this one in particular, it's buyer supplied plumbing fixture policy. The plumber will not provide any warranty for fixtures, faucets that leak or prove defective in any way. I don't want a phone call. I don't want to hear about it. It's your baby. We've set the expectation. Number 2, the plumber will not be responsible for fixtures and faucets not delivered on time to the job site. If the plumber must come back to install something missing from the job, there will be a charge of $87.50 per hour. Plumber will charge $87.50 per hour for any fixture faucet requiring additional time other than what is standard in the contract with J. Anthony Homes. So again, when the phone call comes in, and this has happened to me, I had a customer that supplied their own Whirlpool tub. Okay, all we did was plug it in, and we walked away from it. And when I was doing my orientation with the customer, we were walking through, he wanted to try his tub. And I said, well, that's okay, it was owner supplied. And it didn't work. And I felt for the guy, and I said, well, call whoever supplied the tub. And again, they want to attach you to it. You put it in. What did your plumber do to it? And, I got back to the office, and I faxed this over to him. And I said, I really, I'd like to help you out, but you're going to have to go back to the person that supplied the tub to you. So, again, setting that expectation right from the beginning. And he knew what he was doing when he signed this. Okay? So it's very important. Same thing with painting. A lot of homeowners want to do their own painting. We've got people that go in there on a weekend after the drywall's been sprayed out, and the trim's going to be delivered on Monday, and they put all the color on the walls. Okay? Then we put raw trim on the walls, and we go in there and we stain it and spray it. We got lacquer spraying over everything. Well, you've got to set those expectations. You've got to follow our policies and the way that we do it. So when a customer says, I'm going to do my own painting, let me know before the trim goes in so we don't have to cut everything in. We just say, wait a minute, that's not how we do it, because we put the raw material on the wall, the jambs, casings, and we stain it, and we're not going to mask it off either. Okay, so again, you're setting those expectations. And once they sign off on that, off you go. Shouldn't be any arguments. So identify the buy owner items, establish clear policies, time frames too. If you've got buy owner items, explain to them, hey, listen, my tile guy usually takes a week. You're doing your own tile. Is that something that you can get done in a week? If they say no, 2 weeks, that way you know what you need to do with your schedule. And you can continually give those people a heads up, hey, you're taking vacation to put your tile in. I would expect 3-4 weeks from now, we're going to be at tile. So you can get that customer set up for that. Any additional costs associated with buy owner items, like I said, with the plumbing fixtures and things like that, you want to make them aware of that. And then sign off on your policies. So that's some critical things to go over in the pre-dig meeting. The other thing would be milestones throughout the process. Is there going to be a walkthrough with your electrician before he starts pulling wires? Is there going to be drywall walkthrough after the drywall is done to make sure that any imperfections or anything that the customer sees as unacceptable, you can have a heads up on. So really, those are things you want to communicate to the customer, and it just keeps the communication flowing. The other thing you might want to do is talk about the draw process. Although it should be outlined in your contract clearly as to when you're going to take a draw and how you're going to take a draw, it's always a good thing to set them down, because whether they're a first-time homeowner, first-time builder, there's always some anxiety that goes along with that. Now, how do we handle this? They just don't want to get an envelope in the mail with the draw request. Now what do I do? So take them through that process. Give them a heads up and let them know what they can expect. Okay, estimating. How many people in here have an in-house estimator? Okay, I just want to know if I'm talking to the estimators or the people that have estimators. Let me just get to my... By the time you get to estimating, the customer should have made all the selections. That's a general statement. Hopefully by the time they've signed a contract before that, you've started to do some preliminary estimating. Depending on whether or not you build off of models and you make changes to your models, it's a lot easier to just have a book based on what your model is. A lot of times you can have pre-packaged bids from subs and suppliers in terms of just different changes that you would make to that, and you can do a lot of that estimating inside. But at this point, they should have made all their selections. Signed all the change orders to make sure that all the change orders get incorporated into the final estimate. Okay? The final plans are sent to estimating, and the pre-estimate is based, you want to compare the two final estimates with the pre-estimate just to make sure you're staying in line. All the signed change orders, estimated cost impact of the changes, and then compare that base plan with the plan that the customer is actually building with to make sure you've got your cost controls in place. How many people in here operate off of a purchase order system? It's really a simple thing. I know over the years I've worked for a lot of builders, some big national builders, and they have these enormous accounting systems, purchase order systems. I can't tell you the times that I've been off a job for 3 weeks, and their policy is you don't start a job without a purchase order. But they're calling you, hounding you to get on the job, so you go get on the job, and then they also say, we can't pay you unless you send the signed purchase order in. So 3 weeks after I'm done with the job, I'm trying to get a purchase order so I can get paid. And so if you use a purchase order system, be disciplined about it, okay? Again, set that policy and then stick to it. The purchase orders, it doesn't have to be that big elaborate system. Use a Word document, whatever it is. Excel works fantastic. But whatever it is, stick to it. So be disciplined. You want to create the purchase orders, send it out to the vendors, contractors with the final plans. Again, from a quality control standpoint, the purchase orders should equal the invoice. So you're controlling that process, okay? So the key points here, you've got the documentation, you've got the accountability. I can't tell you how many times in my career I've gotten a plan as a carpenter contractor and I have absolutely no clue what's going into that house. Now a carpenter needs to know flooring, needs to know plumbing fixtures, all of that stuff. So it's very difficult for us to try to build what the customer ultimately wants. So through the documentation, the purchase order, having your specs, you've got the accountability there. Consistency, pick a process, stick with it. And then really, are you getting what you paid for? Okay, You don't give your contractors the ability to switch products out equal or better than. When you've got your purchase order system, you should be really meticulously detailing what you expect from that contractor. Drawings and specifications, complete plans, accurate budget, reliable estimates. Really, on a complete set of plans for estimating, you've got your foundation plan, first and second floor plan, you've got your elevations, detail page, your section page, your interior elevations, if you have niches, closets, different ceilings, you want to have all of those detailed on there so your contractors are bidding what you're actually going to build. You want to have cabinet layouts, electrical plan. You do want to have something that details your plumbing fixtures. Put a site plan on there if you've got the site plan, and then if it's a complicated roof, you want to put the roof plan on there so you can get accurate estimates from your lumber, carpentry, and roofing contractor. The scope of work details what will be installed in a house, comparative spreadsheet of bids. Really, it's based on the company's building process, and it limits unbudgeted charges and establishes contractors' expectations. Again, we use this for our front page of the plans. So there's never the argument of a roofer bidding a 25-year shingle when he should be bidding a 30-year shingle, okay? And that's where you run the risk if you don't have a policy or procedure in place to have those cost overruns. And it adds up nickels and dimes. This is a scope of work. It's kind of hard to see in your packet there. It's almost impossible to see here on mine. But it's going to, pick a scope of work, however you're going to communicate that to your contractors, and stick with it. And again, whatever that scope of work is, have your contractors sign off on it. That's what they're bidding. Okay. Questions on that? How many people use a detailed scope of work for all their plans? A couple of you? Okay. Color selections. The completed selections result in an accurate budget and final price. Again, you want to have the heads up when you're going through the selections process if a customer has to switch a product out. If a tile's been discontinued, countertop's been discontinued, and if that's in your base price, they discontinue it, you've got to pick a higher priced item. Again, you want to have a heads up on that. And again, the color selections process is going to be a showroom versus various vendors. Typical selection options, you're going to, on the exterior material and color selections, you're going to have the roof type and color, siding, shutters, exterior trim, and gutter type and color, window color, front door type and color, garage door type and color, interior materials, you're going to have wall color, textures, millwork, flooring, railing, cabinets, countertops, material and color, plumbing fixtures, appliances, light fixtures. Every single thing that you can think of in that house, you want to make sure that customer has it selected, so when you're estimating it, you're putting your scope of work together, you can get the accurate information out to the contractors and suppliers and get it back to you. Again, we have color selection sheets that we use in-house, but at the end of the day, everything gets sent out off of the production packet. The other thing that we have that helps if the customer is going to make a selection at a vendor outside of our showrooms, we actually give them the paperwork that we want the vendor to fill out and get that back to us. So again, it's controlling that process so that when it does come back and it goes into estimating, you've captured any additional charges that the customer should be paying for or anything that your contractor is charging you for that was not part of the scope of work. Contracts and change orders. Generic contract with the scope of work versus bids. Really what we're talking about is more track building, production building versus the custom aspect. And I see a couple of custom builders in here, and you know, it's really a timing issue. Custom customers, they're going to understand that to send that custom plan out, it's going to take a couple weeks to get bids back. Okay? Again, if you're building the same model time and time again, you can pre-package options up, and then you can do a lot of that estimating in-house. Use of a trade contract guarantees price and the scope of work. So typically what you want to do with your contractors and your vendors is have them bid your plans. This would be if you're doing more production work. You want to have them bid your plans and lock that pricing in. I know it's been difficult with a lot of products that have been petroleum-based. With the fluctuation in oil, you want to make sure that you've got that factored in. So if you sell a job, go out to your vendor and say, can I get this job locked in? But having that relationship with your vendors does help. Having your generic contract with the scope of work eliminates starting from scratch when estimating a plan. Gives the estimator a guaranteed starting point. So we're going to start from this plan, and then we're going to add a sunroom, we're going to bump this out, we're going to add a powder room. Makes it much easier. It's a fairly effective way of estimating a plan, and it doesn't work with every builder. Even some of the simplest homes, if you're a one-man shop, you've got to send them out for bid. There's too many other things that you've got to do, so rely on your contractors. And it doesn't work well with extremely customized homes. Like we said, if you build the same house over and over and customers make slight changes, many times you can, based on your experience, you can figure that out. But on a complete custom home, you want to send that out. So whether or not you're using generic, the other way would be bidding each plan. It takes longer and it relies on the trades to return bids quickly. And again, if you're going to bid out every house, you've got how many bids going out, you've got the plans, you've got to make sure that as those estimates are coming back in, you're really combing through those and you're making sure that they match up with your scope of work. The final house budget is very accurate as long as no changes are made after the bids are completed by the trades. So whatever plan you're going to send out, and this is difficult with custom plans because most of the time those people are changing constantly. Whatever plans you send out, make sure they're as close to the final plans as possible. And then document those changes and make sure that you're following up with change orders with your customer. Bidding each plan minimizes the need to estimate most of the house by the builder. Again, you're not taking that responsibility on, you're sending it out to your contractors. And it takes more follow-up by the builder because you've got to constantly be on top of those trades to get those bids back to you. Accurate budget is not able to be completed until all bids are received. There are some things you can guesstimate, but if you haven't built that house and it's a total custom house, guesstimate's just a guesstimate. So you want to make sure that you've got the best information back from your contractors. Change orders. It's going to differ. Change orders are going to differ with every builder. I know one custom builder that doesn't use written change orders at all, and I'm talking $1 million homes. Okay, he's never had a problem, but it's not something that I would certainly recommend. As far as change orders go, talk a little bit about the change orders themselves. However you handle change orders. Okay, we've got formal change orders in the office, nice computer-generated change orders. You can email them back and forth to your customers, easy to work with. But on the fly, our superintendents, they've got handwritten change orders. So the customer's out on the job, they want something changed. Expediter documents it, customer signs it, we come back into the office, we'll generate a nice computerized change order to email around and do whatever we need to, but we'll have that written change order. If you're not going to, if you're going to do a verbal change order, and a lot of times it's just a $100 item, $200 item, if you're doing a verbal change order, first of all, you should follow the policy and what your contract says, okay? But if you're going to do a verbal change order, make sure you follow that up with a written change order, okay? A lot of times, our guys won't have this. Customer calls them and says, I want something changed. They phone it back to the office. We'll generate the change order, and we can keep the job moving. You're going to set that threshold. It's $500. If it's $100, whatever that threshold is for a verbal change order, make sure you've got a policy in place. And if you don't get that change order signed and back by a certain time, that gives you the option to stop work. Predetermined cutoffs. We really don't have any predetermined cutoffs for change orders. Obviously, when a foundation's in, we're not going to be bumping out and adding sunrooms. But there are certain builders out there that will say once a house gets to a certain point, we're not going to allow any more change orders. Okay? And if you're operating off a purchase order system, many times we have purchase orders generated for things that are going to happen 2 months from now. So it gives you an opportunity to either say yes or no. We'll do a change order anytime, but it's just making sure you're keeping track of it. But having the predetermined cutoffs can keep your job on schedule. Sometimes customers don't know how fast the job is going to go. So as you're going through the job and you're scheduling the job out, you know, it's easier to keep things on schedule if you do have cutoffs. Generally eliminates late changes by the buyer if you've got a cutoff. Know how your competition handles change order cutoffs. You don't want to take a real wild position if the industry is over here. So it's always good to talk to your competition, find out how they handle it. Charge the customer accordingly for late changes if you are going to allow them past your cutoff. So have a policy in place for that. Let the customer know at the point of sale when they're not allowed to have change orders. Some builders don't allow change orders past certain phases of construction. And then cutoffs, they do tend to upset the customer. Okay, so it depends on your flexibility. But establish a change order process with your subcontractors. If your subcontractors are going to make changes out in the field on the fly, a lot of times our electrician, when they do their walkthrough, okay, that's where we see many of the changes come through. Make sure he documents that, gets a signature, gets it into your office so that those changes can get on a purchase order, get on a change order back to the customer, okay? But you want to make sure that your subcontractors are in the loop on how you handle your change orders as well. There's 3 variables that are addressed on your change orders. It's the scope of work, the change of the contract sum, and the contract time. And if you're a remodeler, this stuff is very important. Okay. Change of the contract time. I just share with you some stories out of arbitration. There's been cases where the builder hasn't changed the contract time. They've gone over their time frame, and they've been penalized. And they had the right, under the change order, under the terms of their contract, to add days to the project, but they didn't. The contract sum, that's pretty simple, and the scope of work. You want to be as detailed as possible, too, when you get into change orders, okay? So keep track of those change orders. Again, we prefer to have written change orders before the work starts, not after the work starts, depending on your dollar threshold. If the verbal's approved, document it and have them follow up with the written one. And if the change order is unpaid, it gives the contractor the right to stop the work. So. Selections and change order review. Almost like we've laid this one in here twice. most products and colors selections taken care of before the construction starts. Document every meeting with the customer. Have a method of sign off on their decisions. Plan review and changes must be signed off by the customer. And ensure the plans are accurate to the model they represent. I have that put on there because many times us as builders will build a model, and that's when we find out what doesn't work. So we'll change something. And make sure that that representation that the customer purchased, they're aware of any changes. Okay, we've had issues where, or we've had arbitration cases where the builder actually moved a wall 12 inches, made a room smaller so that the kitchen actually worked out better, and they didn't notify the customer. And of course, it was the dining room that got smaller, and the customer had their dining room table that they wanted to put in there. And when they moved in, what happened to this room? The whole time the customer never knew, but the builder didn't tell the customer, we did this so that our kitchen would be, it would work better. So any of the changes you've made to your model, make sure that the customer is aware of that. Whether it's making something smaller, making it bigger, adding something. Most of the time it has to do with function, and most of the time the customer is fine with it if they know. But you want to make sure that that plan represents the model. Developing a preliminary budget. The budget objectives. It's the ability to check the project's profitability before signing a contract. That's what we talked about. You should have a preliminary budget so that you know what you're getting into. Quick pricing before the home is bid or estimated, and compare to the actual cost each phase of construction. So again, with a custom home, you're not going to have this ability. But if you build off of models, you've got that on the shelf. You could take a look at that budget, and based on the changes a customer is going to make, you've got that understood. Budget factors and parameters. You've got the existing sale price, additional standards and options that the customers put in there, and then the custom options. You've got market research, and then the building practices. How do you build? How do you as a company construct your home? Those are all things that you want to take into consideration when you're coming up with your budget. Preliminary budget, whether you do it on a spreadsheet, whether you've got some line paper that you're doing it on if you're not computerized, you really want to develop that preliminary budget, okay, before the job is signed. So once you've developed that preliminary budget and you've got your bidders list put together, you're getting ready to send things out for bids. So you've got to develop your bid list, and your bid list really is going to be based on availability, the relationship you have, the reputation that the contractor has, the quality of the work that they do. So you really want to try to pool a good class of contractors. Opening the phone book up and picking a contractor out is probably not the best way to do it. Go to your local builder association. Ask for a membership roster there. That's always a good way to do it as well. You want to prepare the specifications, scope of work plans, and send it out to the bid. Now again, a lot of times companies have a lot of different ways to communicate their information. This is the easiest way for us to do it. Everybody looks at the same sheet of paper. Everybody's looking. There's nothing lost in translation there. Okay. I know in the world of electronics now, we save a whole heck of a lot on postage, paper, printing costs. A lot of our stuff now goes out electronically. So that will have an effect on whether or not you got somebody on your bidders list or not. If you're all electronic, and you've got some contractors that haven't jumped into that arena yet, perhaps you're not gonna let them bid. You want to develop a bid schedule based on the construction schedule. It's really based on when you want to have those numbers back by. Okay, so if you've got everything set to roll, you're going to excavate the house in 3 weeks. You want to make sure that the excavation your foundation contractor, lumber contractor, carpenter contractor. You want to make sure these people understand what your schedule is, okay? Because again, you control that process. 2 to 3 contractors per bid typically works. Now, many of you may not use 2 to 3. Many of you may have a single line contractor that you use, but you're able to keep his pricing or her pricing in line by understanding what their scope of work is and understanding what you expect out of them. We try to have at least 2 contractors for every class. You want to prepare a call and bidding track sheet. Just helps you keep track of the bids, helps organize the process, and keeps the paperwork straight. Depending on if you have, 5 houses or 50 houses going, again, you just don't want to let that get away on you. And you want to be realistic when the bids are due. Okay, I know right now everybody is so busy, so typically bids are taking 4 to 5 weeks to get back to us. I'm kidding. We can have laughter. So you send everything out and the bids come back. Again, if you have a real loose scope of work and you're just sending a set of plans out without a lot of detail, the bids are going to reflect that. Okay, you'll have wild swings in your bids. So when the bids come back in, if you've got a real tight scope of work, you can really analyze it apples for apples. Okay, and that's really important. And again, it's quality of the contractor, okay, quality of their work, what's their safety history, all of that stuff factors into the apples to apples comparison. And one of the interesting things, and I should just back up a second, when you do put your bid list together, I know I talked a little bit about safety. One of the things that you should do is you should check your whatever contractors you're going to use, you should check their work comp mod. And if you don't know what the work comp modifier is, it's a score based on your safety history, okay? And it's actually put together by the Work Comp Rating Bureau, which is a state agency. It's all public record. And if you don't know how to get it, go to your insurance agent and give them the name of the contractor and he can get it. That's going to be a real good indicator as to how competitive that contractor is going to be. But for me, it's not about competitiveness. It's going to be how safe that contractor is going to be on my job site. So we have all the contractors that work for us, we have their work comp modifier. And let me just give you a small real-life experience that I had with our work comp modifier. About 6 years ago, we didn't really take safety that seriously. And again, we're a carpenter contracting business. We thought we did, okay? And again, what you think and what your wallet pays that's reality. When you get the insurance bill and you got to write the check, that's reality. So whatever you thought, if the bill is real fat and big, that's your reality. Well, everybody starts out at a 1.0 for a work comp modifier. Our work comp modifier, because we had some accidents, and it's based on your history of accidents, we were up at 1.45. We were paying 45% more for our insurance than an ex-carpenter contractor was. That got my attention. And we took on a real strong look at safety. What do we need to do? We changed the culture of the company. And currently, we have just over 250,000 man-hours without a lost time claim. So that means everybody showed up for work for 250,000 man-hours. Equates to be about 2,600 working days. So, I mean, we've made some incredible strides that way. And again, safety is something that we all strive for. It saves us money, but really we want everybody to go home from work safely every day. Question in the back?
Did some of those go non-reported?
The question was, did some of those go non-reported? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The slightest cut on a hand we report. Because if that doesn't get reported, and all of a sudden something happens, infection takes place, and it goes, escalates to a bigger claim, you want to, even if it costs you $120 to have a guy stitched up, or $500, But the thing about medical only is that's not weighted as heavily in the equation as the lost time claims are. Okay. So what it did when you boil it down to dollars, essentially right now our work comp modifier is the lowest it can possibly be. It's at 0.68. Okay. So essentially we're paying, if it was dollar for dollar, we're about 60% less for our work comp than we were paying back then. So it certainly does pay. And in a competitive market, it allows us to be more competitive when we're going out looking for work. So that's why you should really know what your contractor's work comp modifier is. Okay. And the other reason why, again, nobody wants to be on the front page of the paper with a massive construction accident. Okay. So check that out. Any questions on that? The bid impacts, again, you've got winter conditions and other conditions. Other conditions could be just what I talked about, safety. Okay, what's their safety history? Bidding contractors, paying bills on time. These are all things that you want to take a look at as you're analyzing these bids. Budget flex, unforeseen hurdles and cost overruns. You want to make sure that you've got that in there as well. Okay, are we going to have to pay for heated concrete? Okay, does the customer have it in the contract that they're going to pay it, or are we going to pay it? Okay, do we have to bust frost? You sign a job in October and you think you're going to dig it in November, but something hangs it up until January. Okay, those are things that you want to take a look at. And then performance feedback. You want to get performance feedback from everybody in your company on the contractors. Okay, so as you're analyzing that bid, you can go to accounting, talk to them about the billing practices. Were you happy with it? Weren't you happy with it? Talk to your warranty person. We're thinking of awarding this bid to XYZ company. Do they have any warranty work out there? Is there any issues? How have they responded? And then obviously construction. What's the quality of their work? Talk to your superintendent. And then purchasing. Okay, how good are they on getting the bids back to you? How good are they in getting the signed purchase orders back to you? So those are all things from a performance feedback standpoint that you want to take a look at when you're analyzing the bids from your contractors. Any questions on that? Many different ways you can analyze this, and this is probably really small on your sheets there. And it really just depends on how sophisticated you are. All you're talking about is bid for bid, but then how detailed is the contractor's bid and making sure everything's in there. So you can put spreadsheets together. How many people have a standalone construction software accounting package that they use? What do you guys use? Buildtopia. What do you guys use? GIAC. GIAC? Okay. So it's all encompassing then?
As far as the accounting of it, yeah.
Okay. And again, negotiations. It really just depends on where we're at in the market, right? I mean, negotiations right now, things are a little slow, so you've got some negotiating room there. Contractors are willing to take a little less just so they can keep their guys going. And you want to go into the negotiations with a win-win, okay? I can't tell you how many times, as a carpenter contractor, we've just had builders that it's almost insulting, when you tell them why your price is what it is. You got good guys, low turnover, and they tell you your overhead's too high. That's not a win-win attitude, okay? Why is it? Well, I understand it. Okay, we'll give you the job. And then value versus price, okay? It's not always about price. It's about relationships. It's about how long the people have been working together. And you got to remember, sometimes with estimating too, Maybe you get a light job, so you ask a contractor for a little help. Okay, well, you get a nice thick job, you can't keep pounding them down. Okay, so you've got to be able to look back on those relationships too and see what is the past performance, not only in work, but have they helped me out in a bind as well. You want to monitor the budget and negotiate accordingly. If you've got a pre-established budget and you've sold a job based on that pre-established budget, work with your subs. Tell them, I've got one here that's kind of short. And the other thing is, remember, you're the customer. And that's something I think that a lot of builders lose sight of sometimes. They're the dictator, not the customer. And, they're telling. But the subs have to be flexible as well. Contractor loyalty. When the numbers are close, who are you using? And are you taking the cheapest guy in town and putting his numbers up against a contractor that's been working for you and taking care of you for 5 years? So take a look at that loyalty and what does it mean to you and how does it impact the quality of your product? And ultimately, how does it impact the experience that you're giving your end customer? And there's always other options. So if you don't like the bids you got, then go find 3 more new ones. Awarding contracts. Update your budget spreadsheet as you award each trade. Okay, so if you're going to have your estimated bid and then your actual bids, just to keep track and see where the variances are, you want to make sure you're updating that as the information is coming in. Do not award the job to a trade who cannot meet your schedule. You're just automatically starting off on the wrong foot. Okay, I remember back in the late 90s, we had a pretty good building spurt there. As a carpenter contractor, we would constantly get calls from people we never worked for. Can you start tomorrow? And they had a foundation in the ground, and they're calling me saying, can you start tomorrow? Well, where's the guy you usually use? Well, he's hung up on another job. So again, when you're bidding these things out, especially on trades that are going to be on the job for a substantial amount of time, whether it's a mason contractor doing a brick facade, carpenter contractor, make sure that when you're sending your bids out and collecting your bids, what's your availability? So you want to make sure that not only you do that before you send it out, but when you award the contract as well, are you able to do this job? The more heads up you give your contractors, obviously, the better off everyone is. And then talk to your contractors. If their schedule is tight, just let me know. Let's go back and forth, and what you might want to do is set up a plan B, so that if they can't do it, you've got somebody lined up that can do it. Lock pricing in as long as possible. Kind of an easy thing to do right now, but when the market's real volatile and there's a lot of activity out there with material, if you can lock it in, lock it in. Keep in mind, locking in goes both ways though. If you lock in for lumber and lumber takes a nosedive, you're kind of stuck there. And unfortunately that happens in times like this. Award the job in construction order, okay? What I mean there is don't start worrying about the tile installer when you don't have your carpenter on board, okay? So as it's coming in, build that job out in construction order, so from excavation all the way to cleanup. All bids awarded before the home is excavated. I mean, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Certainly your front-end trade contractors, you want to make sure you've got them online before you excavate. Then ensure that you're at or below budget as you award each phase of the job. Again, that's going to be negotiation. And that's why you want to have a real good idea on that preliminary estimate that you should have before the job was even sold. Real good handle on those numbers. Adapt your strategy to account for being behind if your costs are too high at any time during the process. So what are you going to do if you've got a contractor code or whatever, that section of the estimate, if it's running high? Are you able to make it up in other areas? So you want to have that in mind as well. And just don't beat on that contractor, but see if you can't spread it out if you've got a wild swing. Questions on that? We're going to notify the trades. And I don't know, this is interesting in putting this together. Really, it's based on your relationships, but alert the losing trade first, in writing or by phone, that they didn't win the bid. Okay, a lot of times, especially in times like this, guys are hanging on. I got that, I sent that bid back. It must be coming up, and all of a sudden they drive by the job, 3 weeks later, and somebody's framing it up or somebody's painting it. Communicate with them, and it's just showing respect. They gave enough of their time to give you an estimate. Call them up and let them know that they didn't get the job, not that they find out some other way. And you want to make sure you do that before you tell the winners. And then you want to notify the winning trades, okay? Send out purchase orders for the contract amount. If your company is on a PO system, I'd recommend that. If they're not, if you don't use purchase orders, make sure you sign the contractor's bid then and send it back. Something that puts in writing what's included and what that dollar amount's going to be. Okay, it's really important. Yeah.
Do you standardize your contracts so they're all on your form, or do you actually manage all their forms on your jobs?
We standardize. The question was, do we standardize our contracts so that there are forms or the contractor's forms? We use all of our own forms because we're in control. We don't want any discrepancy based on what's in their paperwork versus our paperwork. So, good question. Update the building schedule and get a copy to all the trades at least 2 weeks before the home is to excavate. A lot of times that's difficult. You don't know where you're going to be 2 months from now, and you should know where you're going to be on the job, but it's kind of difficult to schedule out that far. But you want to at least tell the trade that they got it, okay? So your drywall contractor knows it's coming up. So he's got a good understanding. If you're 2 months from excavation to drywall, well, we're going to plug them in. So keeping them aware of where you're at is a real good way to communicate. And it's a nice way to not have a hiccup in the schedule when you get to that particular contractor. File all losing bids for future reference and possible use in case a winning trade cannot do the work. I'm sure nobody's ever had that happen where a trade contractor can't get to something and now you're scrambling to find somebody to do it. So you want to just keep that. And it gives you a nice reference point too as you start to build those files. It gives you a nice point to go back to and maybe not bother a contractor for a price by going back and referencing an old bid, assuming that it's relatively recent. Cost control process holds the trades to the scope of work and specifications. Do not pay for extra items and only pay for items agreed upon. And that's why having the purchase order and having the contractor sign the purchase order and send it back with their invoice, that's always a nice way to do it, because if there's ever a discrepancy, then you can have accounting come right out and ask production, why was there a $300 addition to their invoice? Okay, then you can go dig the change order up. Oh yeah, that's right. So it holds the trades accountable. Monitor the budget by only paying what was agreed upon in the budget. Manage the extras. Always check the specifications or scope of work first before you write an extra. Categorize extras and review weekly. You just want to make sure that those extras aren't piling up, okay? And if there are extras, why? The contractor, if your scope of work and your plans were as detailed as they should be, there shouldn't be extras, okay? And by having that purchase order agreement sent out to them, they've agreed that that's what they're going to do it for. So again, their information is only as good as what you're giving them. And what you're giving them should be generated right here from what the customer is expecting. Okay? Use a weekly profitability report on each job sorted by category. Sometimes that's a little bit tough, but you do want to stay on top of that just to make sure that the job's not going bad. That's why I love purchase orders so much, because once the purchase order's cut, there it is. You know. Try to use even flow scheduling. Work with the trades when they cannot meet a scheduled date. Okay, there are going to be occasions where things just happen. Okay, we run into, cold weather like this. If somebody can't get to a job because they can't get off the job they're on, you got to work with them and be reasonable.